We are back. Twins, Senators, or Senators Twins, baseball, past, present, and future. I'm Ralph Tyko with the Comfortably Zoned Radio Network. We have a full house today. The co-hosts are Ronnie Rabinovitz and George K.
How you doing, Ralph?
How are you guys?
Good. How are you?
Good. Now, you both have guests, and they're both here. And we're going to start with you, Ronnie. Would you please introduce your guest?
I'll be happy to. Frank White is a very dear friend of mine. He lives here in the Twin Cities. Frank is the head of the R.B.I. program for the Minnesota Twins, restoring baseball in the inner cities. He's also written a wonderful book called They Played for the Game, the history of Negro League baseball in the Minnesota area. And his father, Lou Pud White Jr., played for the Negro Leagues. And Frank has done a lot of work with a lot of youth, and Frank played many, many years baseball himself. So, Frank, welcome to the show. I'm glad you're here.
Ralph, thank you so much. Ronnie, thank you so much. Good to hear from you. And
thank you.
Sitting here in London, Ontario.
Wow.
I know where you are.
Well, welcome to Comfortably Zoned, sir. London, Ontario. We've never had a guest from there. This is
tell us why you're up in London.
I'm here, gentlemen, to watch my grandson Royce White play for the London Lightning, which is in the NLB Canada, which is the professional basketball league in Canada. Unfortunately, they lost last night in a great game, but my grandson was a beat.
He was
I don't know if did you hear that? I'm sorry.
Your grandson was a what?
A beast. He had a great
beast. Okay.
Great. That's terrific.
Very cool.
He's such a great
George,
player.
would you introduce your guest?
Yeah, sure would. Mark Hornbaker and I have known each other for about 5 or 6 years, and the subject of our podcast is Senators Twins, and Mark has been very instrumental in developing several Facebook groups and a wonderful website about Washington baseball, and I had a chance to meet him about 5 or 6 years ago for his inaugural meeting that he held in Bethesda, Maryland, which has now grown to well over 100 attendees each season. And I've been asked by Mark next year to make a presentation once again about Washington baseball, and I'm looking forward to doing that, and I'm very happy to have Mark on the podcast with us.
Wow, this is terrific. I'm honored to greet you on behalf of Comfortably Zoned Radio, Mark.
Well, I want to thank you for the invitation, and George, thank you for inviting me to participate on the show today. And, the baseball meeting is something that we started 6 years ago, and basically one of the contributors to my website thought it would be a good idea if some baseball fans would have a get-together. So basically that's how the meeting started. But again, I want to thank you all for allowing me to be part of the show today.
Wonderful. George, you're first. I'm sorry, Ronnie, you're first.
Okay. Frank, tell us a little bit about the book that you wrote. It's a fascinating book.
The book is called They Played for the Love of the Game, Untold Stories of Black Baseball in Minnesota. And so I list things going all the way back to about 1884 and then forward to 1960. Included in the book are many names of individuals that people just don't know about. Of course, with the Twins, we've got Rod Carew and Tony Oliva and Kirby Puckett, and so those names are pretty solid because they were in the daily papers. My book really chronicles those untold stories of great athletes, great baseball players that people just have no idea played in Minnesota, as well as some of the stories of when the Negro League teams used to barnstorm through Minnesota.
Oh, wow.
Great. It's a great book. It really is.
First name that comes to mind for me when we talk about the Negro Leagues is Satchel Paige. Did he have any experience coming through Minnesota that you chronicleized in your book?
I don't really chronicle him in Minnesota. I do talk about when he played in North Dakota for that great team that they had out there that won the National Baseball Tournament. And but I mention him because they played against, right prior to the National Tournament, they played against the Twin City Colored Giants, who my father played for. But on that team at the time, this was in the 30s. My father would have been a young kid at the time. They played against Satchel Paige, and there was a gentleman, Maceo Breedlove, that just was an awesome hitter. In fact, in the game where they lost to that team, Maceo Breedlove hit 2 home runs off of Satchel Paige. And
wow.
his numbers were tremendous. Later on, I would be talking with Buck O'Neill, and another gentleman said to Buck O'Neill, he mentioned his name, Maceo Breedlove. And Buck O'Neill said he could have played with any team in the Negro Leagues. He was a great, great hitter.
How great a hitter was Buck O'Neill, and how come he is not in the Hall of Fame? What happened there? His last eligibility, he came so close, and they ended up giving him kind of a consolation prize, an award. I thought this was horrible. He was the first black coach in the major leagues with the Cubs, and he was tremendous, a tremendous dignitary. Why was he not elected to the Hall of Fame, gentlemen?
Well, Ralph, that's a question that will trouble me always. His stats were good enough to play. He was a great ambassador for Black baseball. Played against all of the greats, and he would tell you if he was still alive. I was fortunate enough to be with him at least a half a dozen times. He talked about recruiting my father, but for the Monarchs. But there is absolutely no reason that anybody could ever give me to say why he's not in the Hall of Fame. And yeah, they did put a statue, something out front of the Hall of Fame, but he is not in the Hall of Fame. And to me, that's a slap in the face to Buck O'Neill.
Right, the statue itself.
Sure is. Absolutely.
Outside, that is a constant reminder of, he's good enough to warrant notice, but not quite good enough to get inside, yet Bowie Kuhn is good enough to get inside. Crazy.
It's ridiculous. It's a tragedy. It really is. It's not right.
Okay. How good was your dad, sir? If you were a baseball scout, and if he had the opportunity to play, if things weren't so screwed up in this world, what a travesty it all is. But would your dad have been a major leaguer?
Well, let me share this in this way: is the Yankees reached out to recruited him. He would have been before Elston Howard. Buck O'Neill tried to recruit him to play with the Kansas City Monarchs when he came out of high school. In 1946, he won the high school batting title with a mere batting average of 600. That record still stands today. And so after that, he played here in terms of semi-professional baseball in the Twin Cities, and then we'll go on to fast pitch softball. We still have at home 3 trophies where, if you're familiar with fast pitch softball, not an easy game, and considered at the Classic League here in the Twin Cities, where we had a couple of teams that always went to the World Tournament. So he won the batting title. He's got a couple of trophies and also trophies of being the MVP of the league that he played in. And he's also been inducted into the Fast Pitch Softball Hall of Fame. I would say, of course, I'm going to be a little biased, but I don't know that I saw anybody that could hit the ball like my father in either sport.
Wow.
You watched him play, Frank, didn't you?
Yeah, I got
play.
to see him play. I got to see him play, so obviously I got to see many of his opponents. He was a catcher. What a great arm. He almost had as good an arm as me, but he was an outstanding player, and I've heard many stories of the times that I didn't get to play. That team, the Twin City Colored Giants team, did produce some major leaguers, a guy named Solly Drake.
Solly Drake played with the Mets, and he had a brother, Sammy Drake.
Sammy Drake, right, exactly. And they would be recruited. The team used to go up to Canada to play, and there's a guy named Hal Babe Price. If you looked into Western Canadian baseball, was maybe one of the best left-handed pitchers in Western Canadian baseball. He got signed by the Dodgers, and Solly got signed initially by the Cubs. And
right.
Eventually he in both. Solly is still alive, actually, in L.A. And
really,
so there's a number of guys that I got to see play that were outstanding. Obviously, well, I shouldn't say obviously. Later on, I would get to see Dave Winfield and Paul Molitor. David's like my brother, and then his brother Steve and Paul Molitor. So if in looking at those guys, I'm for sure not going to tell you my father was as good as Dave Winfield. But at the time, in his time, he clearly should have played in the major leagues, as well as many other black players that just didn't get the opportunity because, unfortunately, the color of their skin.
Right.
Right.
And you played baseball too,
Dave
Frank.
Winfield
You were a hell
play
of a
basketball. Was Dave Winfield as good a basketball player as reputed? Could have he been in the pros? I'm just curious.
Right. I played with David, and I will tell you, and I just told you about my grandson briefly.
Right, that's why I asked.
So, but David was, first of all, let's just quickly say that, there's only one or two players in history, athletes that have been drafted by 4 professional teams. David is one of those. He was drafted in the ABA and the NBA. Clearly, wow. David could have played professional basketball. We played together on a team. He didn't get to travel with us to when we won the national championship because he had to go to spring training. But clearly, David was an athlete. He was a fierce rebounder around the basket. David's about 6'6", but he probably played about 6'10". Tremendous power, tremendous rebounder, tremendous jumper, clearly a very gifted athlete. Let me share one other thought about David. So David, after practice at the U for baseball, he's on his way back to the dorm. They're having the intramural track meet. So he stops and says, okay, well, let me see what I can do. He wins the high jump with a jump of 6'6". He just did that for, let me see.
and you played ball, didn't you, Frank? You were a hell of a catcher.
Well, I believe I was. I'm waiting to be. I think the end of the year here into the same Hall of Fame as my father.
Oh, great!
Oh, wow.
That'd be great. Now, tell me a little bit about the R.B.I. program that you're headed up for the Twins. What's going on there?
Reviving baseball in inner cities. Our program between Minneapolis and St. Paul is about 5,000 kids. We are really working hard. Bill Peterson is on our coaching staff. He's the guy that coached Molitor and Winfield in Legion ball. Might be the only Legion coach in the country to have coached 2 Hall of Famers. Steve Winfield is on our coaching staff, as well as a few others. But we work hard at trying to get all kids to have better baseball skills. And then we have an all-star part of the program where we select all-star teams at 3 different age levels, and then coach them, and we do some traveling with them. But by and large, I'm thankful for the Minnesota Twins and the job that they do with their community fund in terms of really reaching out and helping youth baseball, not only in the Twin Cities, but throughout Minnesota and actually even in Florida, where the spring training system is.
That's great.
Who do you give the most credit in the Twins organization for advancing your cause, sir?
I think the president at the top is Dave St. Peter for sure. I think Dave has got a great vision. And over the years, I've worked with a gentleman named Brian Donaldson, who right now is the executive director of their community fund. And so I think those 2 people, although there are a couple other names, those 2 individuals, this is my 16th season running the program. So those 2 individuals are really at the core and the roots of the program, and keeping it connected and reaching out and making it happen.
Do the Twins provide like coaching seminars and what have you? Do they provide players or coaches to give clinics?
They do in many forms. We not too long ago, about a month ago, we have a Play Ball Minnesota Coaches Conference, and usually we get 200 plus coaches that come from throughout the state to that. But in addition to that, they also have some Brian Robbie, who also played with the Twins. He goes around the state and provides clinics for kids and coaches. Our staff, we also do coaches clinics in the Twin Cities, although we have been up to Red Lake, Minnesota, up to the reservations up there to provide clinics for about 3 different years. So the Twins are very good at having players continuously, former players, be involved. Sometimes we get current players when they can fit it into their schedule to make appearances, and for sure that's a plus. I know Miguel Sano was at one of the clinics last year where we gave kids, every kid that showed up gave him a glove, and Miguel is, let me tell you, he is put together. He is a rock.
Yes.
Yeah, he sure is.
Speaking of him, we'll just get off the subject one quick moment. Any of you guys have any reaction to what a terrific start the Twins have had this year? And isn't this
unbelievable? It's great.
I keep telling Ron it's early. Well, it's starting to get later now, Ron. They're doing great so far.
Right.
Yeah, and they hang in there, and best of all, they're winning with good, solid defense and good pitching.
Yeah.
And I think that's terrific. George, we'll give you a chance to talk to your guest a little. We'll get back. You guys can have a sip of water and let George take over.
Well, I was very happy to listen to Frank's comments about the Hall of Fame and Buck O'Neill and the Negro League and his dad. I mean, that's a very, very interesting story. Mark has been involved with Washington baseball, and certainly, Washington baseball has a lot of connections to the Negro League with Josh Gibson and Cool Papa Bell, and with Buck O'Neill. I agree as far as the Hall of Fame, he was certainly deserving of it, and hopefully he will be in someday, and not on the outside, but on the inside. And the one player I know that Mark will probably want to talk about too, mention the Hall of Fame, which has always been beyond my comprehension, and that's the exclusion of Cecil Travis. And I thought maybe Mark would talk a little bit about that, as well as some of the guests that he's had with his meetings, and talk about Washington baseball. Mark?
Well, thank you very much, George, for having me on the show today. And when you talk about players that seem to be left out, of possible Hall of Fame recognition. A gentleman named Cecil Travis would probably be that player here in D.C. He was truly a top-notch player during his major league days. He had to spend time overseas during World War II, and basically had some injuries that took place over there that when he came back and did play ball again, he was never quite the same player due to these injuries. And but if you took the years in the before he went into World War II, he would rank right up there with any players of his time. And that kind of brings us to one of the speakers that we'll have at the my DC baseball winter meeting this coming February. A friend of George's, a gentleman named Ed Johnson, will be speaking about Cecil Travis, as he's done quite extensive research about Cecil and was able to actually spend some time with Cecil on his farm in Georgia. So we're looking forward to having Ed speak more about Cecil because one thing I found out in my time talking and writing about DC baseball history is you can always learn something from other people, and that's actually one of the reasons why I host this annual meeting. I believe there's a wide variety of people. It's not only the players and the coaches and managers that have great stories about the history of baseball, but I believe it's the fans, the ushers, the bat boys, everyone that participates in the game. And I try to give all different types of people the opportunity to share their stories at our meetings. Sometimes I'll even host a smaller lunch event where we can invite a local ball player and let him speak to a small group of people.
Yeah, Mark's been a little bit modest. I'd like him to mention one player in particular that he had last year was Freddie Valentine. He had a little dinner session. Freddie had actually been a terrific player for Washington and played for my dad in Hawaii as well. And Fred was very well received, and it was a special event to have a player of Fred's caliber come to the meeting and have dinner with several of the attendees. So you might want to talk a little bit about that, Mark.
Well, I sure will. Fred Valentine, in Major League history, he may not go down as the most known player, but in the D.C. area, he was a fan favorite when he played in the mid-'60s for the Senators. He also played for the Orioles. Yeah, we were just delighted to have him attend the dinner 2 years ago. And what made it a special evening was we had another fan favorite from the expansion Washington Senators team, Jim French, also in attendee. So with Fred and Jim in a dinner of 30 people, we just had great conversation. Everyone that attended the dinner just enjoyed every moment of it. We actually had a couple other, we had an old reporter that covered the Senators in the 60s that came up from Florida, and it was just a wonderful evening. And so much so that Fred was gracious enough to accept the lunch invitation where, again, we invited 5 or 6 other people to join us. And again, for me, it was just wonderful because the people that attended the lunches would bring up memories about something that happened in 1966. And Fred would be able to tell you every detail about the play, what the ball and strike count was at the time, what type of pitch it may have been. And to me, it's great to read books and things like that, but when you're able to hear these stories from the players that participated, it sticks to you so much more, I believe.
How cool.
That's great. That's great. That's very great.
And with that said, I'm sorry, with that said, one of the speakers for next year's meeting does have a Senators, expansion Senators, but a Twins connection, and that would be Brant Allier. And he has accepted my invitation to speak at the meeting also. And I'm going to have quite a lineup. I'll have 6 speakers.
He may have been a former Met, if I'm not mistaken.
He may have, but I know of him as being part of the Senators, and then again, as when he left the Senators, he was part of the Twins in 70 and 71.
Oh, okay. Well, the name sounds very familiar from a Met standpoint. And
well, a lot of those expansion players with the Senators in the '60s actually played for my dad in Hawaii when my father was the manager of the Hawaii Islanders in the Pacific Coast League, and Brant Allier was one of them, and Freddie Valentine, Dave Baldwin, quite a few, Jim Duckworth. Quite a few of the players on their way up or on their way down actually played for my dad in Hawaii. So I was really happy.
Did you go over to Hawaii?
No, I did not go to Hawaii. At the time, my mother and sister were there with my dad. I happened to be working, so I couldn't go over there. But my father was there for 2 years, and my mother and sister were there. They had an apartment in Hawaii and really enjoyed themselves, but always maintained their home in Pennsylvania. So after the season, they would come back to Pennsylvania. But my dad enjoyed Hawaii. The problem was the travel was just horrendous. He would go on a 3-4 week road trip, and that's the way they scheduled. So they'd be in Honolulu for a couple of weeks, and then they'd be on the road for a month.
George, what years was your dad a coach with the Minnesota Twins?
Ronnie, he was there in '68. So
68.
The year he was there, Cal Irmer was the manager, and the other coaches were Bob Oldus and Billy Martin and Early Wynn. And the Twins really thought that they were going to have a good season because they had won the World Series in '65, had great players in Killebrew and Allison and Lemon and those fellows, Tovar, but they had an injury problem. Harmon Killebrew only played 100 games in '68, and so they really had a bad year. But my dad was very excited to be in Minnesota for the one season and really thought that they had a shot at the World Series, but it just didn't happen.
Mm-hmm.
Did your dad interact with Billy Martin much, and did he have any positive or negative experiences?
I never heard anything negative about Billy Martin. I mean, Billy Martin and my dad obviously were on the staff, so they interacted, but they were different people. My dad was very quiet, and Billy, on the other hand, was rather loud, and so they were two different people. But I never heard my dad never said anything bad about anybody, and certainly his comments about Billy Martin was that, hey, Billy was on our staff, and he and I enjoyed talking baseball.
Well, if the baseball gods are listening, I've put together something really special. 2 sons on one show who are so proud of their families.
It's so great. So great.
And this is terrific for me. From a producing standpoint, it could not be better. George, it's always a thrill. I got to tell you this. We've been doing this now 4 or 5 months, maybe, and
we have. It's been great.
One level or another. You bring back stuff. Having no idea, it sounds. I'm 70, so people think, well, he's a geese. He must know it all. I grew up in the 50s. Your dad played in the 30s and the 40s, and learning all this stuff is tremendous. I just learned about life as a AAA ball player playing in Hawaii that I didn't know. That you would think, wow, that is pretty cool. But if you're gone for a month and your family is there, a month at a time, and that means 2 or 3 different months over the course of a season when you're gone, it really takes the fun away from it from that standpoint. But
Well, you're right, Ralph. You know, in my dad's instance, I just want to mention this because my father was very much family oriented, and when he was managing in Hawaii, you know, my mother and sister were with him, and that was wonderful. But he really enjoyed being with his family, and when he was on the road, that was a long time. But over the years, I was fortunate because I grew up when my dad was playing. I, you know, was an adult when my dad was coaching, and so I saw both sides of his life as a baseball player and a manager and a coach. And for me,
right.
baseball has
Now,
always been
your
part of
mom
my
had
life.
to keep it all together over all those years, raising you and your sister. Not enough credit is given to the wives of ball players who have to keep some semblance of family and normality going while, you know, their husbands are in the limelight, this, that, and the other thing.
That is a very overlooked fact, Ralph, that you mentioned that. My mother was just a wonderful woman and tremendous with her, you know, bringing up myself and my sister, and she really did. She had to be an absentee. My father was an absentee father for many years, as 6 months out of the season. Now, when he was, you know, home in the off season, it was great because he was with us every day. But on the other hand, when he was traveling, when he was playing, that was a long time away.
Sure it was.
Did he have to work in the off season, as so many players did in those days?
Well, he did during the war. He had to work in the defense industry because he was declared 4F. So in the off season, he did work building aircraft in a bomber plant in Trenton, New Jersey. And then the year he retired, he had actually opened up a sporting goods store and owned a sporting goods store in Trenton, New Jersey from 1947 to 1960. So that was 13 years. And at the same time he had the sporting goods store, he was the baseball coach at Rutgers University. So he was doing, you know, both things after he retired as a player, but still involved with baseball.
Right. And that's how you got involved with
right.
shoes.
Yes.
I'm sure.
It was a natural for me to work into the athletic footwear business, being part of that athletic industry on the business side rather than on the player side.
Right.
Hey, Frank, do you remember the evening we spent with Bob Kendrick from the Negro Baseball Museum, and he was sharing stories about Buck O'Neill? And I told you that I could have sat there for hours and hours listening to all those stories, because he used to drive Buck O'Neill around, didn't he?
He did. He traveled with him often, and in fact, what I tell people is if you ever go to the Negro League Baseball Museum and Buck was there, and Buck gave you an account, if you were fortunate enough to go through the museum and Buck was leading the group, it was tremendous. Bob, because of his time with Buck, has really taken on his mannerisms. I really love to listen, as you just talked about Bob. In fact,
me too. Absolutely.
On August 20th, we're going to honor Roy Campanella with the St. Paul Saints in the city of St. Paul. We're having Roy Campanella Day, and I tried to get Don Newcomb to come, but David said Winfield said he doesn't really travel anymore. So Bob Kendrick is going to actually come up and talk at the at the pregame ceremony. But this is a way again to honor Roy Campanella, because back in '48 when he was with the Saints for about a month, he was the first African American to play with the Saints and the first African American to play in the American Association. So this is catching up with honoring him for that. Obviously, he goes on to be MVP 3 times and all of those stories about him. But in St. Paul, we really need to recognize that he was here or in St. Paul playing in the American Association.
Is that August 20th, Frank?
August 20th. It's a Sunday.
Okay.
And
yeah, great.
But again, yeah. But
I'll put it down. I'd love to be there.
Yeah, I'll remind you, Bob is a great storyteller, and again, he has great mannerisms similar to Buck.
He does.
I believe, Frank, I believe the Kansas City, the Negro League Museum is in Kansas City, is it not?
Yes.
It absolutely, Kansas City, Missouri.
Right.
And if anybody's in the area or you're traveling through, you have to stop and see that
Phenomenal.
part of baseball history. Yes.
Yeah, it's phenomenal.
Well,
I've spoken there a couple of times, and it's just terrific. Bob Kendrick and Ray Doswell are just terrific guys. Just fabulous.
gentlemen, I have to put in a plug for Ebbets Field Flannels. They will recreate, I know this comes out of left field, but all these teams we talk about, all these minor league teams, these Negro League teams, they can recreate the caps and uniforms of these teams. So if you're so inclined, check out their catalog. I have nothing vested in them. They don't sponsor us or anything. But just wearing the caps around town brings to mind there's a fellow who wears a BBB cap around town here. It's a blue cap with a red brim. And turns out it was the Birmingham Black Barons that Willie Mays, my hero, played for. And Willie Mays also played for the Minneapolis Millers right before coming up to the major leagues.
Ralph, can I mention one thing about Willie Mays, but maybe people don't know, but Willie Mays, when he started, as you mentioned, with the Birmingham Black Barons, he then went from Birmingham to Trenton, New Jersey, and he played for the Trenton Giants in 1950 on his way to Minneapolis and then on his way to the New York Giants. So Willie Mays, when he came to Trenton, my dad, I'll never forget, my dad had a sporting goods store at the time. He gets a call from the New York Giants front office saying, George, we're sending a young man by the name of Willie Mays down to the store. Please give him whatever he needs and send us the bill. We think he's a pretty good prospect.
That's fabulous.
Yeah, and he was pretty good.
He was pretty good.
Yeah, he was pretty good.
Yeah, I mean that wasn't
Frank, did you ever meet him?
understated, was it?
Frank, did you ever meet him?
I know I never met him personally. I don't think so. Maybe I was in the store, but I know my dad used to love to tell that story because, here it is. Willie Mays walked in the store and my dad said, okay, Willie, whatever you'd like, it's on me. We're going to send, the Giants the bill.
I love it. Frank, did you ever meet Willie?
I did when David and Kirby got inducted into the Hall of Fame. I was at the hotel, and so I got to meet a lot of guys. I didn't meet him before that, but I got to meet a lot of guys when I got. I used to travel to go see David play, so I used to get to see a lot of ball players and have dinner with them and that type of stuff. But I did meet Willie once.
Great, that's terrific.
Is there anything that that you'd like to say on David's behalf in his dealings with George Steinbrenner? I can make him laugh, can't I, guys?
Probably not. Probably.
Okay, I'm just curious. I give you got the mic.
Yeah,
it's there for you if you want it, and if you change your mind, you could always come back and chat about it.
They eventually did make up.
Yeah,
so to speak. So
to speak, right? Exactly. Along those same lines, I had the opportunity of meeting. And remember, I'm an old New York Giant fan and a San Francisco Giants apologist. And I was the tops rep in the minors for a lot of years in the 80s and 90s. And I got to meet a lot of old boyhood heroes who were coaching, managing in the minors, roving coaches and what have you. And I got to look Johnny Roseborough in the eye one day after he, like Dave and George Steinbrenner, supposedly made up. And I got to tell him how that Marichel's act was the most embarrassing thing as a Giant fan in the world, and I know you guys made up, but it ain't right when a guy hits another guy on the bat with the head with the bat. That's just right. And he said, he looks at me and goes, oh, we're over it. And I looked him in the eye and said, mm-hmm. And he kind of smiled. I said, yeah, you're over it. It's just, in the same way comes to mind anybody who deals with George Steinbrenner, from what I understand. Yeah, they're over it. Yeah, it was no big thing. George was George. Yeah, Juan was Juan, just acting out. He was upset. We're over it. Life is the way it is, guys.
It is.
This has been terrific. I'd like both guests to promise to please come back individually and continue the conversations. I am so thrilled. This was a terrific show. And anything anybody wants to say in closing would certainly be appreciated by me.
Yeah. Well, this is Mark, and I would like to tell Frank I really applaud all the work you're doing with the R.B.I. Group and promoting the Negro League baseball. We try to do it as much as we can on my DCBaseballHistory.com with the Homestead Grays. We have some video clips of them on the website and everything. And I think it's wonderful when people like you find the time to give so much back to the Negro League and to promote the Negro players that played in Minnesota.
Well, Mark, I appreciate that. It's gentlemen, it's been an honor. Ronnie, thank you so much for the invitation.
You bet.
I love sitting and listening to the stuff. George, oh my goodness. We need to talk about when your dad was with the Twins and all of that kind of stuff. Those would be some great times as I was younger. I think Billy Martin was, when he became manager of the Twins, what a wonderful thing. He had, if you'll remember this, Harmon Killebrew was on, they did a double steal, and Harmon Killebrew was on first base, and so there was a double steal. So when you have Harmon Killebrew stealing bases, oh my goodness.
Oh, yeah.
I know Billy liked to play small ball, and I'm not sure how many times you have to play small ball with Harmon Killebrew, but that's a great story.
Right. And then you had Allison, wasn't much of a small ball guy either.
Exactly.
Those guys could hit the long ball. They didn't have to rely on the small ball.
That's for sure. I just want to mention, you guys, the name Vic Power, who was a Twin for a short period of time, but was really messed over by the Yankees. Not called up for all the wrong reasons, and just a microcosm of the times. And he spit in their face because he went on to be a terrific American League ball player and probably the best defensive first baseman of his time. Do you have any memories of Vic? Because he was one of my favorites along the way. Anybody want to say anything about Vic before we close it out?
Well, I would just quickly say that in my neighborhood in St. Paul, everybody wanted to be Vic Power. So he was, when he came to the Twins, he was a fabulous player. Some people might have thought he was a little flamboyant, but you're right, probably defensively, you couldn't get anything by him. And he loved this game, baseball.
You know, as good as he was, I'll tell you how good defensively he was. He played some second base with Kansas City along the line. I can't tell you what year it was, but he played a little middle infield along the line. Very slick, very, very slick, and a disgrace that the Yankees would hold him back. And, you know, again, a reflection of the times perhaps, but there has to be, and one of the reasons your program, the R.B.I. program, is so important is because there are fewer major blacks, African Americans, playing in the major leagues than there were in 1955.
That's right.
Or one of those years way back then that would, shock us. And I'm glad you guys are doing what you're doing, and what a terrific organization the Twins are. Let's give.
They really are.
Nobody to give them a big hand, but every week we have somebody on that illustrates that, how the game is being passed on to the kids in one way or the other, and it's not going to die. It gives me great pleasure to think that way, because for a while I'm thinking, what's going to happen in the future? It's a corporate game. Kids can't go to the game with their parents, this, that, and the other thing. This gives me hope for the future, gentlemen.
I happen to agree. Ralph, I happen to agree with you. I think the future of baseball, you have to get, like the R.B.I. program is terrific. There's so many athletes today, they're playing other sports. They're not playing baseball. And to bring the love of the game back on that level, I think is terrific, and it bodes well for the future of the game as far as the players are concerned. And I hope that it does not become any more corporate than it is. I'd like to return it to the roots of having great young players in this country wanting to become a major league ball player, because it's a fantastic opportunity for them, and I think the R.B.I. program is great for that.
Wonderful.
I agree 100% with that. I'm a big supporter, and I think they need to do what they're doing plus more. Again, I think part of it's the cost of playing Little League baseball. These days, when I was playing Little League, you went to practice and they had 2 or 3 baseball bats, and you had to use one of those. Now all the players seem to have 2 or 3 bats of their own, and they're walking up with $200, $300 worth of baseball equipment to a Little League game. So any help they can get in the inner cities is much needed.
Absolutely.
Very well said.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Thank you,
Frank,
guys.
will you come back
It's
again?
Terrific show. Pardon me?
Oh, absolutely. Any time. I would love to. And
Great.
when I come back, I would love to talk about the decline of baseball, because, gentlemen, I think as it began with Jackie Robinson, it almost then is when the decline started to begin, and we'll talk about that another time. But
Great.
So,
well, good luck with
being
it.
part of this.
Hope
Thank you,
have
everybody.
A good time in Ontario.
You're an integral part of this, George Case III, as are you, Ronnie Rabinovitz. So thank you, guests. I'm honored. The network is honored. And we'll be back next week. And to those of you out there, I just want to say, keep on keeping on. It's all that it's about, perseverance. And thank you again, gentlemen.
Yep. Thank you. Goodbye, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.